Inkling, The Expanse, and Call of the Sea. This is Staying In.
Have any of you ever done a diet?
I think you're talking to the wrong pair, really. Here.
All right.
For a diet.
For a diet. All right.
Yeah.
You've never, experimented at Lent?
No, never done Lent.
No, I've never done that. I've never... I've cut down before where I've said, "Oh, I won't have that second cream cake this evening."
What else does cutting down look like for Peter? You look down in the shower and you think, well, you look when you're bending over to pick up the magpie. You look down and you go, "Oh, that's a bit more meat on the pudding than usual. I better start cutting down."
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Well, I stopped at my worst point. I was eating a couple of rounds of toast before bed.
How many is a round?
2.
4 slices of bread. And what was on the bread?
Peanut butter.
Peanut butter.
Right. Yeah, before bed.
Did you? I want to just dig down deeper into this a bit more because I find this fascinating. Did you have 2 and then go, I really want another 2, or did you always have 4?
It would always be 2, and then I'd be like, I'm still not satiated
All right,
yet.
okay.
Yeah, you know how, and dog owners or people who've been around a lot of dogs will know this. You know when you've got a dog. And then they're doing fine, and they eat and they eat and they eat, and then they throw up, and then they eat the sick, and then they eat some more things. And it's basically because their brains don't have the thing that tells them to turn off. That's what I've got.
So why aren't you 30 stone?
Because of Alex.
All right.
Basically, ultimately, I've got to the point now where I will turn to her and say, "Do you think I should have a couple of slices of toast?" And she'll be like, "Do you really need it?" And I'll be like,
Is this why you're in bed as well? 2 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, that's right.
So what? She's like your caddy.
Yeah.
I think a 9-iron for this shot. So it's very. I find that fascinating, Pete, because for most people, the smell of toast is what wakes them up in the morning. But for you, you associate it with bedtime.
Bedtime. Yeah. A lovely cup of tea and a couple of slices of toast, and then off to bed. Yeah, I used to have that, or I'd have half a bag of nuts, or I'd have a bag of crisps. Or just snacks, basically. I would finish dinner and then immediately go to the snack cupboard.
And do you bury them around the flat, like a squirrel, discreetly?
I sort of keep them stuck within my pouches of my cheek for later use. No, but I did have at one point when one Christmas where I got bought a vegan sweet set. I had quite a lot of confection basically underneath the television in a little drawer, to the point of I would open it up to get a game and just sweets and crisps and all sorts of things would just pop out. And that was the point where I was like, all right, well, this is mostly for the winter coat, but after this I will...
The winter coat?
Yeah, a fat.
I know, but we have central heating, Pete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not like you have to go and hibernate and live off your fat stores for a few months.
Yeah.
Or is it? I don't know.
Oh, well, I like to do a thing every year where I go for as long as possible without turning the heating on. I love that. I think
that's pretty normal.
But I think but looking down down the barrel of the gun as it gets towards winter, and you're like, oh, it's freezing. Shall I put on the radiators? Because as soon as you do that, it's breaking the seal. As soon as you do that, you can't go back.
Does that satisfy you, Sam, in terms of an answer?
Well, yeah. I mean, blimey, we've kind of gone the full gamut of middle-aged white British man.
I thought I knew everything I needed to know about Pete, but you always continue to surprise.
Kris,
Sam,
you took me to a special place.
I did
the other day.
Yes.
finally, Pete, I've been asking for an introduction to Chris's special place for ages. He keeps on like going there and he keeps going there and having like evenings with his other friends and just being like, don't get an invite, nothing, and then and then for whatever reason, finally said, "Oh, why didn't you come down? I'm going to my local board game cafe."
I think you're ready.
I think you've passed the test. You solved the riddle. So yeah, Kris invited me to join him and a friend of ours, a mutual friend, at his local board game cafe, Board Beans. Board Beans,
which
cafe.
has recently just opened back up.
Yeah.
After being unfortunately closed during lockdown and doing a fantastic service of board game rentals, which we talked about in the previous episodes of the pod.
Yeah, we were kind of thinking about that because there was a couple of games that we played the other day, and we were just like, we'd quite like to, take this home with us. A bit like Blockbuster. We've had like a taste of this game, but we'd really like to play it again and take it home. Anyway, so we went to Board Beans, and
paint us a picture. Paint us a picture. What happens when you walk in?
You walk in, and you hope that you're going to recognise the people you're looking for because they might be wearing masks. Mm-hmm. It's not like chance encounters. It's a bit more like open plan. Lots of nice wooden tables and wooden benches to sit on, and then the standard issue wall of games.
Yep,
it's quite a nice setup because it's got a big like wall of games, and then it's got like a smaller sort of like side cubby of family games, specifically family games. So a lot of stuff from Haber in there actually.
Ooh.
Which is really nice to see.
Which is all pretty much bright yellow.
Which is all bright yellow. And then alongside the family games, there's a nice sort of selection of smaller things, like some 2-player games, I think, and things like Love Letter and, The Mind, like small little box games like that. And then just like a countertop filled with some really nice cakes and brownies.
Oh, yeah.
And sweets. And then obviously in the corner, the games for sale, which, whoops. So we went there and we had it was just really nice to like not be in each other's houses and to just experience like a social event with like other people and other strangers. Like I know that sounds weird, but like that's the appeal of, for me, like theatre, cinema. When we went the other day, there was a Pokemon tournament on. So it was rammed, like there was loads and loads of people in there, and it was just absolutely, buzzing, and it was a really nice environment to be in, like sharing the joy of one singular thing with other people together.
It's nice to be going out and being around others that share an interest, but you don't know, isn't it? It's nice. It feels a little bit more. It's like a reminder of normalcy.
Yeah, I mean, like. I think what defined it for me is we were in there and we were staying quite late, and some people walked past, and then they knocked on the glass. They went and ran away, and I was like, when you're in a niche thing that
the British public is back.
Yeah. Like, and that's like the most like, we're back to normal, everyone.
Yeah.
I really like that board game cafe experience because it is like being in a restaurant where you're waiting for your food, and then you see what other people have had delivered to their table and go, oh gosh, where's that? And you look at the menu. It's a bit like that. You look and go, what are they playing?
Yeah. There was a table next to us playing. Was it The Alchemist?
Alchemist, yeah.
And they were playing that. We were in there for about 3-4 hours, and they were playing that one game for that. I don't even think they'd finished by the time that we left.
Jeez,
and it wasn't quite like the time, Kris, that we were in Sugar and Dice in Liverpool, and we were playing some stuff together, and some people walked in and they pulled Dead of Winter, didn't they, off the shelf, and they literally like opened the rules on page 1 and went, all right everybody, set up. And I was just like, oh my god,
I've got that here actually. We need to play that at some point, Sam.
Yeah, we do. But they look like Fraser, the guy who runs it, kind of just like ran around the tables, basically, teaching 6 games at once does a great job of sort of making everyone, because that's the only thing I don't like about board game cafes is that when I get a game or when I'm playing a game for the first time, it's just me and the rules for a bit, right? It's just like me and the rules for
hanging out.
We're just hanging out for a couple of days. We're getting to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing how the game plays, and then I'm ready to play or to teach it. However, when we're in like the board game cafe, someone pulls a game off the shelf, hands me the rule book. I don't know why, and then then I feel under pressure to like learn and teach it and make it interesting.
But you do a very good job at the teach, Sam. It should be noted you do a very good job. One thing I really like about particularly Board Beans is that for lockdown, looking for new board games, I have my usual places I go to, say on YouTube or BGG, for recommendations, from people who I feel like have similar interests to me, even though I don't know them. And that can take a little bit of time, cross-referencing and things, which has its own charm. But, I sidle over to this huge kind of selection of games, and Fraser's like, okay, so what kind of things do you usually like playing? Oh, okay, well, if you like that, you'll like this. And if you like that, you'll definitely like this. And obviously, the more times you go there, the more they understand the kinds of things that you like playing, and therefore recommendations come thick and fast. And the games we played, Sam, were entirely recommendations that came from Fraser. That's a mark of a good cafe, that you can kind of get those recommendations, that just do speak to you, based on the player count, based on your temperament, based on your experience and levels of patience, and stuff you don't like and stuff you do like, really. And it's really lovely to kind of have that language that isn't just typing something randomly into Google. Yeah. To have that kind of discourse, it's great.
I guess my other problem with it is that I play the games and I love them, want to play again, so I buy them. But I was very responsible. We played quite a lot recently when we went, and I only bought one. So
I only bought one as well, actually, which was, I just saw it at the bottom of the shelf, and it was because our table was next to it, and I'd been looking at it, and I'd heard about this game a while ago, and I'd always wanted to give it a go because it looked like a lot of fun, and it was just there, and I thought, oh yeah, definitely. There's something about obviously having something there in person, compared to seeing it online. At the very least, you can kind of gauge how big the box is, and you go, okay, right, yeah, that's not taking up a lot of shelf space. That looks really nice and very twee. I'm having that. So I didn't pinch, sorry. I bought.
I was going to say, because now you're not allowed back.
Support local business.
Yes, definitely. I bought GoTown from Helvetiq Games. We've spoken about Helvetiq in the past, haven't we, Sam?
Oh, tons. Love them. Absolutely love them.
Very distinct graphical style, which I really, really love. They did a Compromat, I think, didn't they? Compromat was one of those?
Compromat. Bandido.
Yes. I didn't know they've got a Bandida, Sam. Did you see that?
They do, yeah.
Yeah. So I bought GoTown, and which, in a nutshell, it's just a kind of unbridled kind of restrained silliness, I should say. A very quick, I say quick, about 20-minute card game where you have a deck of cards, and the majority of the cards are floors, and the aim of the game is to be the first to have 5 floors on a building. And the way you do that is on your go, you can play as many cards from your hand as possible. To play a floor, that has to be 2 cards, and both the cards have numbers on them, and they have to add up to 9, exactly 9, neither above or below. And you just go around and you do that. If you look around the table and somebody on their top floor has got a number that you need to complete your floor, you can steal their card, combine it with one of yours, and add a floor, and the rest of their floor is instantly destroyed. So you get this really interesting kind of rubber banding where buildings will get really, really high, and then within 30 seconds they're back to 0 again. And there's something quite funny about it. There's a kind of a little bit of take that gets into a little bit of silliness, but what tempers that is little things like a dog, which you can kind of play a dog card, and it guards your top floor, so no one can touch that unless somebody plays a bone card, which lures the dog away. Or somebody may play a jackhammer, which wrecks another person's floor. Or even a wrecking ball can be played, and there's only one of them in the deck, and that will take out your floor regardless if there's a dog there or not. Or maybe I play this card here, the Thief's card, which allows me to steal a card from somebody's hand. Or, better still, play this one, which means I get to steal a card from everyone's hand. Or I can skip that person's go, or skip everyone's go. So it's just this frantic kind of sense of, oh, well, there's no chance I'm going to beat them, so hang on, whoa, suddenly I'm winning. How did that happen?
It's a bit like, we spoke about Muffin Time the other day, and Fluxx, and actually GoTown shares a lot of DNA with those kind of games. Like, you're winning 1 second and then you don't play for 2 rounds because everyone's just decimated your building and like forced you to skip goes. Like I won the game, and I won literally from a position of having nothing. I was able just to make like the combination and win very, very quickly. And like games like Muffin Time and games like Fluxx operate in the same way, as Kris said, like rubber banding, going from places of, you know, positions of security and success to then, you know, failure and kind of like insecurity on the other end. But what GoTown does, which is a bit more, which is actually quite interesting, is like it creates that same sort of feeling of stretch and flexibility in the game, but it does feel like more logical in the way it does it. Like Fluxx and Muffin Time rely on the randomness and the crazy zany, you know, cards to create that sense of flux and rubberiness to it. Whereas GoTown is all very like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, no, the donut van turns up, so we all skip a go. Of course, yeah, of course the dog is guarding the top floor of that.
So it has like a consistency to its logic. In some way.
Exactly. So part of me thinks that makes it more frustrating when, you know, plans go awry, because you can't just blame like randomness and silliness for it. But also when things go right, you kind of, yeah, that was a good turn. Yeah, well, you look around the table and go, yeah, because you've really got to use the cards in certain orders and play them in certain ways to really get the benefit of each of their abilities to be able to build the towers. I think that's pretty much the only way that you could do it. So yeah, you bemoan the fact that someone's taken your tower because they've done it with very strategic and logical thinking. Like, it's not just a silly random thing on a card and whether I was able to hold my breath for the longest or anything like that. But consequently, I think when someone does something good, everyone kind of goes, yeah, good move. Yeah, you've really thought about, you know.
Yeah. And it reminds me a little bit of that game you and I played of Silk, Sam, where it just became quite silly and we were deliberately just... Logically, we were making decisions that weren't helping us beneficially. They were just there to annoy the other person.
Yes.
And there's a little bit of that here. You can't really begrudge the fact that somebody's stolen the top floor of your building, because you're going to get to do it very, very soon. And you just end up just laughing because everyone is doing it. Yeah. And it just so happens, you know, one of you, in this case Sam, gets their 5 floors first. You know, it could have been anyone around the table. Yeah. And so there's no hard feelings with it. And I really like it for that. And I played this with my parents. And before we even started playing, after I just explained the rules, my mum was like, oh yeah, I'm going to like this. I'm going to like this. And I bought them a copy of it and they love it. I just keep getting pictures of it sent to me from her, of just people playing this game with them, because she likes that take that element, definitely.
Right.
When it feels fair. I know that sounds very strange, but like the sense that you don't have to have gamed the game to be able to enact that. Yeah. You know, anyone can do it. And as long as we're all on the same playing field, as long as we're all doing it, that feels fair then. Do you see what I mean? So yeah, absolutely. I like it, definitely. I don't know if it's because I'm in the kind of honeymoon period of it at the moment, but it's a nice filler, and I haven't played a nice little filler for a while.
It's a throw it in your bag game, isn't it, Kris? Along with Bandido, it is another game that you could just throw in your bag and you know, share Bandido solo. But GoTown definitely feels like the same sort of size game, but an experience you can share with other people. I'm desperate to try more from Helvetiq. Forest is another one that I'm quite...
Yes, they had that on the shelf at Board Beans.
So yeah, just their games are so good. Like Compromat is probably at the moment it's probably the go-to 2-player game that I play with you, Kris. So it's
it's genuinely one of my favourite 2-player games. I should say that GoTown is by Morton and Alexander Bonavance with art by Michel Raymond. Just a little bit of shout out there because the art is really cool as well. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I was drawn to it.
Now, obviously, when you go to somewhere like a board game cafe or whatever, they've got all, you know, tons and tons of games. You know, there's a PDF for Board Beans that you can print out. Don't know why you would. Laminate, possibly, and peruse at your leisure to see what you might want to play next time you go. But of course, I'm the madman who brings his own games, who checks that list for games they don't have, and then brings.
No, Pete. It was like a Sergio Leone western where the cowboy just walks through the door and everyone just turns and looks, and the person stops playing the piano.
And of course, I brought my own like token trays and card
Which
holders.
nobody made fun of you. Everyone's like, "That's a really good idea. That's a really good idea."
Do you want to know something? I think I agree with those lads who were outside shouting at you lot.
That was the Pokemon crowd.
Yeah. Yeah, I did bring a couple of games with me. Actually, one of which we can talk about later, The Expanse by Geoff Engelstein, which I think is a really interesting case of like an exceptional game with definitely not great artwork, but we'll get onto that. But we also played Inkling, which is a game that was only released this year from Osprey.
Ooh.
Great. Fast becoming one of my favourite word games.
Yes. So the reason why I want to talk about it, not only is it like a great game by John Keyworth, and it's got great art by Kwanchai Moriah, but yeah, it's just another, because we talked about Masterword the other time, and I've been thinking a lot since then about, what makes a good word game. And Inkling kind of demonstrates a lot of what I think makes a good word game. First of all, I don't really like Scrabble. I went through a period of playing Scrabble with a partner, like ages and ages. Like we played it all the time. Like it got to certain levels where we bought a Scrabble dictionary, and I learnt all the 2-letter words for Scrabble so I could like dominate and basically cheat the system. And then ever since then, I've kind of gone, well, am I really having fun with words here, or am I just manipulating the odds of what's in the bag? And then like Bananagrams was the first sort of word game that I played, which kind of smashed this illusion that Scrabble is like the be all and end all of word games. And Bananagrams is a great sort of it is a great chuck it in your bag game, because it just comes in a nice little banana pouchy. It's lovely. And Inkling is actually exceptionally chaotic for a genre of games that we kind of feel as quite cerebral and kind of quiet, around the table. Quite a lot of what we assume, like, all right, we're going to play a word game now, like Decrypto or Code Names. Quite a lot of your time in like Masterword is spent sort of pensive thinking and deduction and trying to think of the best word to describe something and capture everything. However, Inkling is a word game which is all about creativity, and it's all about creation, and I love it for that. So how Inkling works is you get this deck of these cards, wonderfully artfully made, and they each have them on a letter, one of the 26 letters of the alphabet. However, the way the letters are constructed, they're constructed in such a way that they can be potentially manipulated to be any other of the letters of the alphabet. So, for example, an S is broken through the middle, so you could make that S into a C, or you could cover over half of it and make it into an N, or cover over half of it and make it into a U. You could turn it on its side and maybe it's a W, turn it around and maybe it's an M. And so how Inkling works is everyone gets a secret card, which has on it 6 words. 3 words that are worth 1 point, 2 words that are worth 2, and 1 word that's worth 3. So the more points the word, the longer and more difficult it is to spell out. And everyone has a hand of these letter cards. And then you just go. And then you just got to use these letter cards to try and spell out as many of these words as you can. Turning over cards, covering over partial cards, joining up cards together and overlapping to create a letter, like turning an L into a T, or, turning an N into a Z, and it really feels like bonkers. It really feels like a creative activity and an exercise in sort of word chaos. And I think what kind of sums it up is that how the game scores is that you get points for how many words the people on your left and right get correct of yours. So everyone sort of guesses the person, looks at the left and looks at the right and tries to guess what the words are. But you get points for how many of the words you guess correctly the people sitting right and left of you are. And when we played it, it got a point where we were all just like, well, I've got to stand up. You know, when we like pushed our benches aside and we're all just like looking over the table, like the guy who runs a cafe started to come over and just like, yep, got that one. Yep, got that. And I was like, I can't. Can you give me a clue? Because I can't. And like, you know, it was almost like we were all looking at like separate magic eye pictures. Like I was like leaning in, crossing my eyes, pulling my eyes away to try and like form this image of this word that Kris has like not created but almost curated. Like the way that the letters are, you will never have the letters that you need to. You might be if you're lucky, but definitely for the longer words, you do not have the letters that you need to make these words. So you have to be creative. You have to spell things wrong. You have to suggest and manipulate and sort of really sort of play to your opponent's sort of sense of logic and sense. And like we were just, you know, standing up around the table, like giggling and laughing at like all these like wonderful little like tableaus we'd all created and like trying to guess all these words. And I think for me, the one thing a word game should always do is make you feel clever and not make you feel like an idiot for not knowing, quote unquote, the long words. And Inkling passes on both those scales because you feel enormously clever for having made, you know, I mean, Kris's is a great example. If you go onto our Twitter or Instagram page, you'll see how he managed to spell architect, which is a work of art. Like he was able to like do that and not feel like an idiot, you know, for not knowing what an architect is, or, you know, just so like that's what a word game's got to do. And Inkling's incredible at doing that.
No, I should say I do know what an architect is.
But what I'm saying is you don't need to know how to spell it in Scrabble, for example.
Exactly. No, I agree. No, definitely. Like one thing I do like is it gives you a degree of flexibility just in case you feel, oh, I've just been dealt this hand of cards. There's no way I can do anything with this. Each round you get more cards, but also you have the opportunity to shed some cards and draw up. And obviously there's a little bit of a risk there. What if I get rid of something that actually is more useful than what I'm about to pick up? But it's a really interesting choice. Okay, what do I get rid of? And my strategy was, okay, well, I'll just risk it and just get rid of multiples of stuff, because I'd rather have it. It's better actually to get something that looks more like a squiggle than an actual letter, because I've got something to play with then. It's easy for me to kind of lean into that ambiguity. It might be that I have every single letter apart from one, and I'm hoping that Sam will be able to fill in the gaps per se and kind of get what I'm going for. So what you're trying to do almost is you're trying to make it something distinctive, like your own handwriting, really, but with these patterns and certain twists of a card. A tilt of a card in one direction can be just enough to turn a B into an A or whatever. Say, for example, you've got to really take creative license.
So Inkling, was the one game. Was one game that I brought, but I also brought the Expanse, and the Expanse is originally a series of books by James S.A. Corey, which is actually two people, but they write under the pseudonym of one person. And the Expanse always struck me as interesting, is because it's kind of sci-fi / hard sci-fi fiction book. It's kind of set in a time where we are not like super duper future fast cars all living forever inside robot bodies. We're not like where we are now, like just managing to re-land a rocket back onto a launch pad. Like it's somewhere in between those two, where like humans have, you know, populated Mars, and, you know, humans are existing but just inside like places of our solar system, and there's still a big sort of like presence on Earth. It's kind of just like a natural sort of, if you want, an expansion of the species out. And the book kind of deals with, as well as like a big bad, like a big sort of thing that's threatening civilization, but it mainly deals with quite a lot of the social governmental politics of what if humans, but over a bigger sort of breadth of times. So the Expanse board game is a board game of the Expanse, or more specifically, the board game of the TV show, The Expanse.
Okay, because there's also an Expanse RPG published by Green Ronin, which is what I thought that this was going to be about.
No, sorry. Sorry if I got you excited. No, this is the board game designed by our good friend, Geoff Engelstein, who, again, we have spoken about on this podcast before. We played Pit Crew and Super Skill Pinball 4K.
Oh, this is the lad who wrote that book and you really like it.
Yes, he did.
The lad.
Yeah. So, Geoff Engelstein is kind of one of those names, a bit like Rainer Knizia, where they'll make a game, I'll be like, right, I'm interested. Doesn't matter, what it is, what's going on, I'm interested in this. So, WizKids were very kindly enough to send us a copy of Expanse and its 2019 expansion, Doors and Corners.
Okay.
And the best way to describe this game is to describe another game, which is extremely niche, but which is why I know you'll know it, Pete, because we've played it for 2 hours. So, Twilight Struggle.
Oh, yeah! Love a bit of Twilight Struggle.
So, if you've been around the hobby for any sort of protracted period of time, you will have heard about Twilight Struggle. It was like top of Board Game Geek for ages and ages and ages. It's an absolute sort of classic of the hobby, even if it's maybe not be. It is a recognised sort of classic of the hobby. It's a game which recreates the Cold War. Basically, it's a 2-player game. One player plays America, the other player plays the Ruskies, and yeah, it's all right. We played it digitally, and I couldn't. And I remember when we played it, Pete, I said over and over again, I could not imagine what this is like to play physically, because the amount of like computing and things that we had to track and different areas of influence and like different tokens and stuff that would have to be on the board would just be absolutely impossible. However, the crux of Twilight Struggle, and I think why people really enjoy it as a game, is it goes off this system where when you play a card as a player, you either play that card and play the event on it, so the action described. So say, for example, I play a card and it says on it, draw 2 cards. So I can either play that card and then draw 2 cards, but that card will also have a number on it. So say, for example, it's number 4. But instead of playing it for draw 2 cards in this example, I can use those 4 points that are on the card to move 4 troops, or to take 3 tokens from this area and move them there, and then take 1 token from that area and move it there, or build 4 tanks, or something like that. However, if I decide to do that, my opponent can then use the event, draw 2 cards. And that's kind of the tug of war that goes on in Twilight Struggle. Do I use it for the event? Do I use it for the points? If I use it for the points, I'm giving my opponent access to the event. What are they going to do with that? Etc. So the Expanse uses the same system as Twilight Struggle. However, everything is a lot more stripped back. Everything is a lot more dialed down. I hate to say it's my first Twilight Struggle, but it kind of is.
I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but yeah,
exactly. It's not a bad thing. And also, the player count is ramped up to at least 4 players.
Okay, that's good.
And you know what? It's a really, really good area control game. Okay. And there is something really innately delicious about that system. And it's employed here in a way that is really, it's always going to be compelling. That there's always going to be something you want to do in the game that's going to take action points. But if I do it, the people around the table are going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And that's just, if you strip that all away, that's just a really compelling piece of like game theory in itself. And the Expanse, pulls it all off. Everyone plays sort of asymmetrically. We all can do different things. Like one of us is the UN, one of us is Mars, one of us is the rebel belters, the other one, someone else can be the big corporate powerhouse that's the center of at least first 2 Expanse books. And they all operate in a different way. Like the UN can put lots of influence and diplomatic effort into areas. The Martians are a lot more aggressive, and they have a lot more like fleets and military power. But so not done in a way that's like overly like Root. It's not like Root. It's not like a whole different rule set, a whole different like way of thinking and mechanics. It's just like little things that just give you the suggestion of like, this is what your team is like. This is what your organization is like to play with. And you're on this map which has all these different like bases, and everything's like surrounding in the solar system. So you got like Earth, and you got like Jupiter, and the bases are all of Jupiter's moons, and Saturn and Mars. And it's just a little area control game where you're just like moving ships around, putting influence down onto bases, and then whoever's got the most influence and presence in a location gets certain scores and certain points. And if you like that kind of thing, if you like the games of like diplomacy and sort of like a gentle like war game and a gentle sort of area control experience where you are, thinking about how to move and manipulate sort of tokens around geographical spaces in a region in order to eke out the most points from an area, all surrounding this wonderful like card system of balancing events plus points. The Expanse like absolutely nails it. I remember the guy we were playing with, Kris, was really taken with it, wasn't he? Just really...
he loves this sort of stuff, definitely.
Yeah.
Like I played Gaia Project with him a few months ago, which we rented from Board Beans, and he really, really loved that because it does scratch that itch. You're kind of moving cubes and tokens, but to pick up on what Sam was saying, it isn't a game board that is full of cubes.
No.
You're not going to accidentally brush your sleeve and then have done away with an hour's worth of game.
Mm-hmm.
So there's enough there that doesn't intimidate you, but enough that it's enough there for you to sink your teeth into, really, which is quite nice.
But as a licensed product, how thematic is it? Because there's always that push and shove of, do you make a license board game that is close to the subject material, as in the One Ring, for example? Like you're trying to replicate the Lord of the Rings, right? You're trying to, or the War for the Ring, for example. You're trying to replicate specific parts of the story, basically, right? Do you do that, or do you go in a different direction where you take on, you use some of the ideas and the settings, but you actually provide a very different kind of an experience that isn't meant to replicate the story, but is meant to replicate the tone and the feel? Like, how does this stack up in that way?
It's the second one, because as Sam alluded to, like, I mean, I'm only in series 3 of The Expanse. I've not read any of the novels, but there are different arcs that take place. This isn't trying to replicate that in the same way as something like War of the Ring does, where you are the Fellowship. Your quest is the same as the main thrust of the book, to get the ring to Mordor. Here, you're very much in the world of The Expanse, and the delineation kind of factors in relation to those cards. So yes, Sam could choose to take the points, and that allows his opponents to use the action on that card, but only if their faction is eligible to use that card. So there were certain cards for me as a belter, for example, that I just didn't have access to because they were something that only the Martians and the Earthers could have, and vice versa. So there are these slight little modifications there that kind of add a little bit of variability, that feel like you're distinctive. You feel like, again, like it is in the world of The Expanse, of these factions, there's this uneasy tensions between them and occasional alliances. I can't remember what it was called, Sam. At the end of each round, we get access to, is it a tech card or a technology card? So you're kind of upgrading with each round as well. And again, that lends itself to the themes. I see Earth has got these massive cubes. Mars has got ships because they're all about firepower. Me, I've got these tiny little scrappy ships. I'm very good at kind of building stuff from scratch, as it were, so I can kind of surreptitiously move around, and I was very good at getting the majority of ships in certain places because of it. So I never ever felt that it was unbalanced. I think Engelstein's done a fantastic job of honouring the various factions of the show, and you're feeling like you're playing in The Expanse without playing The Expanse's story, if that makes sense. Yes, there's the Roshti, the ship there, that every player has access to, though. And that speaks to the fact that throughout the narrative, that ship forms its own little mini alliances with different factions. It's this kind of unexpected kind of pawn within this kind of larger kind of global threat, this global conflict, really. And the fact that we all get access to that is great, really.
You know, a tight hour for three of us. You know, where me and you, Pete, played Twilight Struggle for maybe 2 hours, and we didn't even.
No, we did. We did finish.
finish?
The atomic bomb finished us off.
Oh right, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, oh yeah, I remember. But after like 2 hours.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I dread to think what that would be as a sort of cardboard version.
So yeah, so the Expanse is, you know, exceedingly tight. It's only an hour, and like, unlike most of games in this sort of genre, this semi sort of like war, what's seemingly very serious, lots of tokens representing military might and all this kind of influence. The Expanse was a really easy game for me to teach, especially in like, you know, a board game cafe environment, because you only ever do one thing. You pick up a card. That's it. And the card determines either how many actions you can take this turn or what event you're going to play out. And that's it. So we were able to set up the board, and I was able to go like, right, you're playing first, Kris. Pick a card, and that was it. And you pick a card from this shop front, almost a bit like, strangely, Concordia, even though I bought it with me. And so the card at the top, you don't have to pay anything for. The second and third cards are like 1 point each of your own like victory points to pay for, and they get more expensive as they come along. So what's interesting about how like scoring works, and what Kris was saying about like when the end of rounds come around, is that the scoring cards will appear in that track. So there is situations where you can be like, I'm looking in really good shape, right? I'm gonna buy the scoring card, and we're gonna trigger a scoring round right now. And we had an instance where the guy we were playing with was dominating, and he was able to trigger 2 scoring rounds back to back and like really make it like an interesting contest. And all of these really, really nice sort of tight, interesting decisions where if you're someone just like new or interested in the hobby, this could be a brilliant gateway game. It's like, oh, I really liked how this game does that. Right, here's something else. I really liked how this game handled, you know, asymmetry. Well, here's root, you know, crack on if you love asymmetry. Like, however, there is one part of this game where I feel like it really dips in such an exceptional way that really does put me off bringing it to the table again. Not so much that I'm not going to, because I think we've already kind of said like that we'd all like to play it again, especially with the expansion, the Doors and Corners expansion, which adds like things like variable setup. Kris, it like randomizes the technology skills that we get at the end of each round, so those are kind of different and you can't like judge them. It adds like changes like different win states and different scoring opportunities, so I think, and they're all like modular things that you can add on to kind of like really beef up or just like gently adjust how the experience goes. That sounds like, you know, that's what a good expansion should be doing. However, for whatever reason, they chose, and probably price more than anything, because, you know, making artwork and hiring a designer and all that kind of stuff is expensive. So they've just taken shots from the TV show and used it for the card art and used it for some of the other, like the player mats. And if you haven't seen the show, and if you don't know who these people are, then for example, like the crew of the Rocinante, I think that's how you pronounce it. Right. Like, because I've only read the books, I know what they're like in my head. I know what that ship is like in my head. If you have a card that's like called Last Resort or whatever, I have a picture in my head of what that might look like in the Expanse universe. However, this is all a cast of characters, you know, pictures from the sets and snapshots, like representing some of the things on the cards, and it feels like a real hodgepodge of design. And it got to a point where I wasn't even looking at the pictures anymore. I was just reading the text on the card because I had no interest, or the picture didn't really directly relate to, you know, the text on the card. And I was crying out for something like, you know, we've all played Jaws, and Jaws, I think, is a fantastic example of a board game that's like referencing or directly inspired by an IP, so the Jaws film, but it has its own art direction, has its own art style. It's not just pictures of Richard Dreyfuss.
Richard Dreyfuss, yeah.
It's not just pictures of Richard Dreyfuss on the beach with a fag hanging out of his mouth. It's like, there is real artwork, and it's evocative and it's interesting, and yeah, you're thinking about the film and you're thinking about all the time, but the art is just enough to the side of that, which makes it its own thing and makes you feel like, which is its own thing and evocative for that. However, the Expanse, it's just pictures of people I don't know, and an art of things that aren't tangible, that I can't grab hold on, that I can't feel anything for, because they're just pictures of people on a TV set. It's really odd for a game that's so mechanically sound and interesting. And I think it's a testament to the actual design that we all really enjoyed it, despite the art not being really that interesting.
I get really easily turned off by Lovecraft stuff when it doesn't really fit my view of what I think Lovecraft is. And I've been playing Call of the Sea on Chris's recommendation, and I will be focusing my attention, Kris, on you.
And me, because I picked it up because Kris was like, "It's on sale,
it's on
everyone.
Sale.
Lovecraftian."
It looked quite good.
And Kris, I'm here to go to bat for Call of the Sea. I think it is really good. So in terms of the Lovecraft thing, it's bright and colourful, and it's got a female character, so it's absolutely nothing like most of Lovecraft's work. But what it does share is it's about, there's a mysterious island, there's a strange incurable disease, there's a group of people that you learn about them steadily starting to unravel, both physically and mentally. There's strange cult-like elements to the game. There is a sort of foreign culture that is not understandable and has never been known to people in the West. And again, that's quite thematic with Lovecraft's work. And initially, because it's beautiful, it's a beautiful looking game, I think, for a small studio to be putting together. And initially, I was really put off by the sort of color, as in the deep amount of color that there was, and the fact that there didn't seem to be any sort of immediate threat. Like there are no enemies in the game. Spoilers. There's not really any way to die. It's Myst. Basically, it's what we would have thought of as like the
Witness.
The Witness. It's like Myst. It's like Riven. It's like Zork, Grand Inquisitor. Like it's these kind of. It's a first-person adventure in which you solve puzzles around a defined geographical location. You get to know that space quite well, but it's all presented in sort of glorious 3D. And it's bright and tropical, and it's lovely. But then there are these little moments that really reminded me of the unexpected from things like Silent Hill, from things like Lovecraft, when he turns on a dime halfway through a sentence and sort of presents you with why this is shocking. There are little moments of that early on that made me go, okay. So then I kept playing through it, and the game starts to ramp up the stakes for the character, if not for you. And by the end of it, I thought to myself, this is an excellent Lovecraftian adventure. Very different to what was written at the time. Very different to most media. You mentioned literally Call of Cthulhu, which is based on, I believe it's based on the tabletop role-playing game. But there's a video game version that recently came out. Nothing like that. Nothing like The Sinking City. Nothing like those games. It isn't all dark, goopy tentacles. It isn't all strange, twisted abominations. It isn't anything like that. But it's a very different story, and it actually reminds me, strangely, of Lovecraft's ghostwritten work for people like Harry Houdini, where he actually, because he had to write in a slightly different tonal style, he still shared some of the mythos in some of his ghostwritten work, and the style feels very different, partly because he's writing with the writer and making revisions, partly because he's ghostwriting it and trying to get a different voice. But it reminds me a lot of that. Reminds me a lot of the Dreamlands that he wrote about as well, that are kind of part of the Mythos. I think they are part of the Mythos. They certainly have retroactively been added in. And it just reminded me that there's a lot to Lovecraft's. There's a lot of depth to the Mythos that is kind of not explored. And instead we end up with these black and green video games that are just kind of a lot, yeah, okay, I get it, there's a tentacle, okay, right, yeah, okay, I shouldn't look at this thing because it'll make me go mad, yeah, all right, that's fine. So I thought it was a really refreshing take on it, and I thought the puzzles, as a stupid person, I thought the puzzles were just at the right level.
Bonkers.
Just right level. I didn't have to look, I only had to look at one thing for a guide.
Okay, Sam's about to present a rebuttal, I think, Peter.
Yes.
I agree with you with its presentation of Lovecraftian themes and ideas. I think it is the best thing that I've played and encountered outside of the original works that actually demonstrates what Lovecraft was all about. Like, my only sort of exposure to it has been a couple of video games, and mainly the Arkham Horror card game with Kris, which is very much about like lots of things attacking you, fighting them back. Don't read that book. You got mental. It's good, and I enjoyed it, but it's very much leaning into the horror, enemy stress, fighting off stuff, scientists reading books and going crazy. However, what I really enjoyed about the Call of the Sea was the idea of discovery, the idea of sharing someone who has a very strong scientific mind, looking at this island, examining it, searching for answers within it, and encountering the same horror, the same stress, the same mental anxiety that we did and I've seen in other Lovecraftian games, but done with a measure of delicacy and interest that I've not seen before, and I really, really enjoyed that. I thought that was, but the character themselves, I thought, well on the last pod I gave an excerpt of some of their quote unquote internal dialogue. I just think, like, with a narrative and the way that's presented, I just think that I think there's just a dramatic misstep. Like, they do so much well with like some of the environmental storytelling and some of those Lovecraftian elements. That just to have this character whittling onto herself all the time, espousing mental thoughts for the sake of some, for the sake of trying to elicit some response from the player, was really heavy-handed. And like in the example I gave on the last show about like, I've woken up after that dream after my mum died and she gave me that, music box. And it's just like, fair enough, she's saying that, but this is a game that also includes like a journal, which is really quite detailed and really well written and interesting. And for you to solve the puzzles relies you to use that journal quite forensically. So it's not like they're giving up information that you feel like the players might miss. It just feels like it's just like story for the sake of story. Like, there's no faith in the character's voice. Like, I would have been much more invested in her as a character if she just had a bit more of a genuine voice. It just felt like just explain. And then when that came to like the puzzles, there was such an unnatural way that the character spoke about the puzzles and never seemed to put two and two together, and never seemed to make those leaps or jumps and conclusions that would make some sort of narrative sense to me, the player, but also give me some sort of clue as to where I was. Like, I really struggled with the puzzles. Really, I found them exceptionally obtuse. I found them wildly varying in terms of difficulty. And I think most of that was coming from the point of there was never any indication of, am I in the right place right now to solve this puzzle? Like, I spent 20 minutes trying to solve a puzzle, but not knowing that, no, you just don't know how to solve this puzzle yet. And like, I think that's when you use the character's voice to give some sort of a hint to the player. Like, oh, I should go and explore some more. before I do this, or I should go and like. There was just that was for me was the thing about it. Just like this wild inconsistency with the character and their voice led me just to get really confused at times.
I think you're right, and I would say that like 80% of the narrative design is really smart. Like some of the environmental storytelling is really great. Some of the, in fact, actually, I would go so far to say it's superb. Like there is some environmental storytelling which is really, yeah, all right, mate, I've played System Shock. Like very like, okay, we're going to do the scrawling in, we're going to do the scrawling on the walls now, are we? Oh, and here's the journal where it sort of ends and there's a, gets to the end and then there's a sort of scrape down the page because somebody's been hurt or something. But it is a little bit uneven in that way, and this is going to sound like an absolutely terrible thing for me to say, but stick with me. I actually think that they should have made the character mostly silent.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I think that her voice could have been used really powerfully in the writing in the journal, which I thought was great. Could have been used really powerfully if you heard it ever so often. Like, I think, for example, they do this really well in the two PlayStation 4 Uncharted's Lost Legacy and number 4.
Thief Stand.
Yeah, and where Drake, for example, will only say things out loud when he's trying to convey an emotion. Like, he's just leapt over a chasm and it's really and scrambled up the side and he's got away from these people who've been shooting and now he's run round the corner and he'll sort of say, whew, got away from that one. Or like, something along those lines. He will break the tension, and the dialogue serves this really good purpose in breaking the tension, making you laugh as a player and saying to you, you're safe. Right. Mm-hmm. Whereas in this one, she just witters on, and it's a shame because basically she doesn't have that much interesting stuff to say most of the time. Whereas when she does have interesting stuff to say, she's really talking about the things that we couldn't possibly know about her. Where she's kind of reminiscing about. There are moments where she's kind of there's a really good moment when she's headed towards a specific part of the island, and you're on a boat, and she's just kind of talking and reminiscing. And by this point in the story, she's seen some stuff, and it would make sense for her being alone to start talking about herself, to start unraveling slightly. But they never use her talking to herself as a sense of her unraveling. They just use it as a, hey, player, here's some backstory we didn't want to show you, so instead we're just going to tell you about it, which I think kind of sucks. And I do agree with you that some of the puzzles are a little bit, am I in the right location for it? I never really ran up against those problems, I've got to say, and I think once I did have everything I absolutely needed, I think there's only one or two occasions where I was like, what do I need now? I think the puzzles they certainly range in quality, certainly, but I do think that there are some really smart ones in there, especially around cracking codes and patterns and that kind of stuff, which again I kind of feel really leans into the Lovecraftian, it's staring you in the face but you can't understand it feel to the whole thing. Yeah, it's uneven basically is what I would say. And this to me, and here's the thing, like, I'm glad I don't review games anymore. Because basically, like, I wouldn't know what score to give this, right? Like, to me, this is either a 6 or an 8, right? Yeah. It's either, oh, I really had a great time.
If only there was a number in between.
No, but it's not that.
Should we create one there?
But it's not between that. It's like at times it feels like a 5 and a 6. It feels like a really ham-fisted, like some really really ham-fisted storytelling. And then at times it's like an 8 or a 9. Like the visual detail, the little nods and references where if you've read all of Lovecraft's work like I have, there are these little nods and winks where you're like, oh, and you'll see these things coming over time. Like, and it's brilliant. And to me, yeah, it's one of those, like, you'll either really get it and really, like, not even get it. You're like, it'll either be your jam or it won't. And what was it for you, Kris, now that you recommended 3 people buy it?
Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay, that was another episode of Staying In with myself, Kris Darby, Peter Willington, and Sam Turner. Hope you're doing okay. Hope you enjoyed that episode. We covered quite a lot of ground there, actually. There was some laughter, there were some tears, and we learned a lot about each other and what we eat before bed, because that's now a thing, apparently. Okay, you're probably irritated by me harping on about this all the time, but I'm going to do it. Stayinginpod.com is where you can find us if you want to. You don't have to, but if you want to, it's there. I don't know, just in case our voices aren't enough. You want to kind of see what we look like, and Instagram will solve that for you. Also, our Twitter page as well as our Facebook page. At Staying In Pod is all you need to kind of navigate your way to and through those various different platforms. The Instagram feed, to be honest, is my personal favourite. I don't tend to do social media, but the gram is where it's at. And Sam has been incredibly diligent with his unboxing of various different things. I think I saw a puppet there the other day. Absolutely fantastic stuff. And generally anything we discuss or about to discuss on the pod, it'll often get a little bit of an unveiling or a playthrough on that page. Also as well, if you just want to say hello to us, hello, stayinginpod@gmail.com is our email. However, if you want to give us a wide berth and you just want to kind of, almost like the Expanse, just orbit us from a safe distance, then you can kind of check out our Board Game Geek page, which has a wonderfully curated list of every single board game we've reviewed on the pod. And likewise, our Steam curation page has on it all of the video game stuff we've talked about. I think that's it really for kind of stage business and housekeeping. So, see you in 2 weeks. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.